So today we're going to be talking about the powers of the legislative branch, which houses Congress. Congress is made out of the House of Representatives and the Senate. What we want to be thinking about is what should Congress be doing, and is Congress an effective legislating body? So of course, to begin, we always have to look at the United States Constitution, which is the source of all the power of the United States government. And as we can see here, Article 1 is going to be the article that is about Congress. Now, in Article 1, Section 1, Congress is given the legislative powers in the Senate and the House of Representatives. So at the very beginning, we create the government. Now, legislative powers is the ability to write laws. That is what they do. They legislate. They write laws. As I said, Congress creates laws. Now, they are the only ones who can write laws. This is because of separation of powers. The president can sign the law, but Congress has to propose and write it and vote on it. Now, when it comes to checks and balances, Congress has the power of oversight. This means that they are watching over the executive branch and the bureaucracy, and they're making sure that the president is enacting their laws fairly. But we'll be getting to that more later. Now, Article 1, Section 8 is the primary location where we see the powers of Congress. When we look at the Constitution, it says that Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. What this means is that Congress has the ability to tax and spend for things like our common defense, our general welfare, and our general welfare. Now, these can be determined by Congress as to what these mean. Clearly, we've interpreted common defense to primarily be about the military. And general welfare, that can be things like health, education, Social Security, all these different things that we'll talk about that the government does. Furthermore, the Constitution says that that Congress can borrow money on the credit of the United States, which means they're the only ones who can go into debt for the government to pay for what we need. They to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among several states and with the Indian tribes. And this is a big one, that's why it's in bold. And this means that they're in charge of writing laws about business. Commerce means business. Now, this is business in terms of trade with foreign nations, but it also means that amongst the several states, so if you're trying to buy something from Virginia, that this basically regulates our entire economy. Now, everything in America has to do with money. Therefore, this is one of the biggest powers that Congress has, the regulation of commerce. Because it means they can control all buying and selling. And if you think about it, all the clothes you have, everything you own, everything you eat is being done through commerce, which means they are regulating just about everything in your life. Article 1, Section 8 says that they can establish the rule of naturalization and bankruptcy, which means they decide how to become a citizen and who is a citizen. Congress decides how one can go bankrupt and what that means to go bankrupt. They can coin money, which means they create our money and decide how much it is worth. They establish post offices and post roads. Means they're in charge of the post office and all the interstate highways. So if a highway goes from Maryland to Virginia, they can write laws about it. They can promote the progress of science and the arts, which means they're in control of what we call copyright laws. So what counts as your property and what doesn't. They can promote science and the arts. That means they provide money for scientific experiments, and they provide money for arts programs. Potentially, if you wanted to do a play it was going to cost a lot of money and you couldn't find investors, you could actually write to the government and convince them that your play is important enough that they should actually give you money to do it. This is another big one, that's why it's in bold. Congress constitutes tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. What that means is they create and pay for the courts below the Supreme Court. What this means is that all the courts that are at the Supreme Court don't have to exist. Congress is allowing them to exist. They're the ones who created those courts. They're the ones who pay the judges. Which means if they don't want to pay the judges anymore, once they retire, they could close that court down. So they create the courts. And the two levels they have chosen to create are appellate and district level courts. Congress, as we know, has the power to declare war. Usually people think the president has this power, but as we all know already, the president is only commander-in-chief. Congress declares war. They raise and support the armies. That means they pay for the wars and they pay for the armies. They pay for our weapons. They pay for everything. They're in charge of the money, which means if they don't want a war to happen, they can just choose not to pay for it. And unless the president has billions of dollars in his pocket, that war is over. They can make rules for the government, which means they decide how they operate. They decide how the presidential branch should operate. They make all the rules. What can the government do and what can't the government do? They make those rules. Now, of course, the Supreme Court makes sure that those rules don't violate the Constitution, but as long as they don't violate the Constitution, then they get to happen. And of course, this is the biggest one. In Article 1, Section 8, it says that Congress can make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers, and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or in any department or officer thereof. This is called the Necessary and Proper Clause, otherwise known as the Elastic Clause. Now what this is saying is the government can do whatever it takes to do their job, which means if it's not in the Constitution directly, potentially they could still do it if it's necessary, if it's needed, and proper, if it's okay, which means usually proper is going to be decided by the Supreme Court. Now, in the beginning, states had all the power. The federal government was very weak. The 10th Amendment gave lots of power to the states, while the Constitution was limiting the national government because it said you can only do what's in the Constitution. But when you take the Elastic Clause, you add it to the Commerce Clause, this pretty much means that any law that can be tied to the economy and money can be written, like healthcare. Healthcare is not necessarily a business, though frankly, most hospitals do run like businesses, and you do have to pay money. But education, another example, they can do education laws because it can be tied to the economy. You need an educated population to have a good economy, good business. You need a healthy population to have good economy, good business. You need environmental laws to have a healthy economy and have healthy people and do good business. You need civil rights laws because businesses can discriminate, and so we're also controlling selling in terms of who businesses sell to. So the idea is that these two combined means that our Congress currently can write laws on just about anything and it's okay. And that's all for now.